Welcome to part 3 of the Jewish Studies CPD 2019-2020. In this final part, we focus on formative assessment. The learning intention for this session is to investigate the use of formative assessment and formative feedback in the Jewish Studies classroom. The Framework for Junior Cycle 2015 states that a dual approach to assessment involving classroom-based assessment across the 3 years of junior cycle and a final externally assessed state-certified examination can enable the appropriate balance between preparing students for examinations and also facilitating creative thinking, engaged learning and better outcomes for students. Formative assessment is the process of seeking and interpreting evidence for use by learners and their teachers to decide where the learners are in their learning, where they need to go, and how best to get there. On page 6 of your resource booklet, you will find some of the strategies that can be used to enhance formative assessment in your classroom. It is important to note that this list is not exhaustive or prescriptive, and there may be a variety of other strategies that you engage with to create and highlight effective learner experiences. However, it is an opportunity for us as teachers to pause and reflect on teaching and learning and to engage with collaborative dialogue around the area of formative assessment. I will now ask you to pause the presentation and take a moment to reflect on your use of the strategies outlined on page 6. This is a really good opportunity to discuss your approaches to formative assessment as a department. William and Thompson have identified 5 ways to effectively embed formative assessment into classrooms that we can apply in the case of Jewish studies. These are clarifying, understanding and sharing learning intentions, engineering effective classroom discussions, tasks and activities that elicit evidence of learning, providing meaningful feedback that moves learners forward, activating students as learning resources for one another, and activating students as owners of their own learning. Talk is at the bedrock of all these strategies, and research has shown that effective talk, questioning and discussion deepens the learning. So talk is used as a tool for learning. We're now going to look at a short audiovisual clip of William guiding us through these 5 pillars of formative assessment. While watching this, you might want to consider what aspects do you feel are most important to you in your classroom.
Now, it is important that children know where they're going, but it's a mistake to think that the best way to do that is always through a narrow learning intention. Sometimes it can't be that precise. If I'm getting kids to balance chemical equations, I do want every single kid reaching the same goal. If I'm getting them to react to a poem by D.H. Lawrence, I don't want them reaching the same goal. And in fact, I would love it if a kid comes up with something that I had never imagined possible. Sometimes I don't have a single goal for the whole class, I have a whole horizon of goals. And it's okay if kids go in different directions. Sometimes telling the students where you're going spoils the journey, it gives the game away. And sometimes it just makes for uninspired and uninspiring teaching. Do you know what? I discovered something. Not all children are motivated all the time. And yet, the idea of sharing a learning intention at the beginning of the lesson assumes that all the kids are really fired up. They're desperate to learn something, anything, just to tell us what we're going to learn today. But you know what? Sometimes a smarter way of starting the lesson is with a question that grabs their attention. Like, why is it colder at the top of a mountain, even though you're closer to the sun? That was a question a kid asked in a class that I was teaching. I just thought, wow, what an amazing question. I'd never thought of that before. I've realized it, but I'd never thought of it before. And in fact, I found it a very good way of motivating a discussion about a particular issue in geography. So the second strategy is engineering effective discussions, tasks, and activities that elicit evidence of learning, not just questioning, but all the ways you find out where students are in their learning. The third is providing feedback that moves learners forward. Back in 1998, Paul Black and I said that feedback should take the form of comments rather than grades, and to their credit, many teachers copied that advice. Unfortunately, a lot of the feedback that kids were getting, even though they were in the form of comments, wasn't very good. It was just a list of things like, this would have been a better piece of work had you done the following things, but you didn't, so it isn't. As Douglas Reeves says, not so much a medical, more like a post-mortem. the last two strategies, activating students as learning resources of one another and activating students as owners of their own learning, underscore the fact that the most important instructional decisions in classrooms are not taken by teachers, they're taken by students, as Rick Stiggins says. And so basically it's putting the learner at the heart of the process. Formative assessment is not a process that is done by teachers to students. It is led by teachers, but it actually is done with students to engage students in their own learning.
So if you're watching this with a colleague, you might like to pause and reflect now on what aspects you feel are most important to you in your classroom. It's also worth noting that Dylan Williams' work is found in the NCCA Toolkit booklets and therefore found throughout these online experiences, so we are naturally getting to reflect on these in further detail. The NCCA Toolkit booklet that focuses on formative feedback states that formative feedback should be focused on the quality of the student work. It should be related to agreed success criteria. It identifies success and achievement. It indicates suggestions for improvement. It should prompt student thinking and allows time for improvement to take place. John Hattie, in Influences on Students' Learning, states that the most powerful single moderator that enhances achievement is feedback. The most simple prescription for improving education must be dollops of feedback. This does not mean using many tests and providing over-prescriptive directions. It means providing information on how and why the student understands and misunderstands, and what directions the students must take to improve. You might like to pause here to go to page 7 of your resource booklet. There you will find 7 scenarios for you to reflect on and consider whether you think they are formative or not. Pause the presentation now if you wish to do this, and when you continue, I will reveal the answers. From the 7 scenarios on page 7, we have identified 2 that are not formative in their approach. These are number 4 and number 7. The 4th one is clearly summative, as just a grade is given, and the final one because the teacher does not engage with the findings of the quiz. If they had, it could have been a formative moment, but in this case, nothing is done with the feedback received. Dylan Williams in the previous audiovisual clip alluded to comment-only marking. It is worth reflecting on what are the advantages of comment-only marking. If we reflect on the ego-focused versus task-focused research on the slide, we can see that comment-only marking often helps students to improve and places autonomy on the student to improve by their own effort, embracing challenges and learning from them. If you are viewing this CPG with colleagues, you might want to pause and discuss what you feel are the advantages of comment-only marking. If you're by yourself, you can pause and reflect for yourself. Dylan Williams states that feedback is using information to adapt to your teaching and adapt the work of your students to put the learning back on track. If you like to make sure that the learning is proceeding in the right direction and to support that learning. If you recall from part 2 of this CPD, we looked at an assessment task where students had to present their research on Tommy Reichenthal. We are now going to use a sample presentation to look at what formative feedback we could give, keeping these points in mind. It should be focused on the quality of the student work, related to agreed success criteria, identifies success and achievement, indicates suggestions for improvement, prompts students' thinking, and allows time for improvement to take place. This sample research is presented as a poster. The success criteria that was given for this assessment is beside it. As we know, it is essential to give feedback based on success criteria. You might want to take a moment now to pause the presentation and, if with a colleague or colleagues, discuss what formative feedback you might give on this presentation. To help your conversation, you may consider the following questions. What is done well? Is there anything omitted that the success criteria required? And if they were doing it again, what might they include to make it better? To see a clearer view of this sample presentation, you will find a copy of it on the website underneath these screencasts. As we have said throughout this CPD, the most important thing with the learning intentions and success criteria is that they are communicated to the students. We are now going to reflect on this by watching a video from John Hattie on how communicating the learning target can positively impact student learning.
Well, the issue of communicating the learning target, sometimes I think if I was starting the work again, I wouldn't emphasise learning intentions, because too often they become very simplistic and they become almost jingoistic in terms of we are learning this today. The key is those success criteria. And certainly, as many people have said, like Shirley Clark and many others, you need if you're going to do learning intentions, you need learning intentions and success criteria. But it's those two things that go together. It's giving a kid a sense of what is the purpose of the learning here today, and then giving them a sense of what is their evaluative notion of what it means to be successful. Like, think of kids playing video games. They know what it means to be successful, get to the next level. And they're prepared to invest an incredible number of hours to get to that next level. And they get very, very many cues and understandings of what that next level is. In many classrooms, kids think the next level is passing the next test, doing the next problem, doing the next item, doing the next assignment. And that is not very exciting for many of our kids in our classrooms. But giving them a sense of what it means to be successful in the particular history or maths or phys ed or music problem they're doing means they're then part of the solution. They know what it means to learn. They know what it means to be successful in that learning, and therefore they're more likely to engage in it. So I think that notion of how you engage them in understanding what the purpose of learning and what success means, but it's that success which turns out to be much more critical.
John Hattie emphasised the importance of success criteria going along with the learning intentions. These questions on the screen can prompt a useful discussion within your Jewish Studies department. If you do not have any Jewish Studies colleagues, you could have this discussion with a colleague in another subject area, as these points regarding the importance of communicating with students, both the learning intentions and success criteria, and giving formative feedback based on success criteria, apply across all junior cycle subjects. You might want to pause and reflect on these questions now. The learning intention for this part of the CPD was to investigate the use of formative assessment and formative feedback in the Jewish Studies classroom. As we have reached the end of this CPD, you might like to take some time now to reflect on the key learning that has occurred. On page 12 of your booklet, you have space to jot down your thoughts. It's based on the what, so what, now what model, so you can think about what have I learned. What does this tell me about my strengths and about my gaps in understanding? What can I do to improve my understanding? What are my next steps? And what are my targets and goals for moving forward? Again, if you're with a colleague, you might want to pause and discuss this, or by yourself, jot down the thoughts to bring back to future meetings. Thank you for engaging with this CPD. If you would like further supports, please access our website www.jct.ie, or for any queries, send them to info@jct.ie, marked for the attention of the Jewish Studies team. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Please remember to give us some feedback on the CPD via the link on the website. You'll find that beside these screencasts. We look forward to working with you again in the future.